3 years of silence. That was the medical reality for the Calloway triplets. Despite the best doctors in Switzerland and the vast fortune of their father, Adrian Calloway, the children had never spoken a single syllable. No dada, no cries for food, just a haunting, hollow silence. That changed on a rainy Tuesday in a rundown diner on the outskirts of Seattle. They didn't speak for their wealthy father, and they certainly didn't speak for his glamorous fiancée. Instead, 3 tiny fingers pointed in unison at a trembling waitress covered in grease stains. The silence shattered with one impossible word, spoken in perfect harmony. Mum. What happened next would tear a billion-dollar empire apart and reveal a crime so dark it was hidden behind the walls of the city's most expensive hospital. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the pavement, turning the grime of the city into a slick, grey paste. Inside the Rusty Spoon, a diner that had seen better decades, the air smelled of stale coffee and burning bacon. Lily Harper wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a faint streak of flour on her pale skin. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. Her shoes, held together by duct tape and hope, throbbed against the linoleum floor. At 26, Lily looked older. Grief did that to a person. It hollowed out the cheeks and put shadows under the eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. "Table 4 needs a refill, Lily. Move it," shouted Giles, the manager. Giles was a man who sweated grease and believed yelling was a leadership style. "On it, Giles," Lily muttered, grabbing the coffee pot. She was pouring for a trucker named Hank when the atmosphere in the diner shifted. It wasn't just a change in noise, it was a change in pressure. The heavy oak door swung open, admitting a gust of cold wind and a group of people who looked like they had taken a wrong turn from a fashion runway. 4 bodyguards in dark suits entered first, scanning the greasy spoon with disdain. Then came the man, Adrian Calloway. Even in a diner that served $3 eggs, he looked like he owned the building and the block it stood on. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lily made in 5 years. His jaw was sharp, his eyes a piercing steel grey, but his expression was exhausted. Hanging onto his arm was Vesper Cross. She was beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful, hard, cold, and sharp. She wore white, a risky choice for Seattle weather, and held a handkerchief over her nose as if the very air of the diner was toxic. But it was the stroller that caught everyone's attention. It was a triple-wide, high-tech contraption pushed by 2 nannies. Inside sat the Calloway triplets, Leo, Noah, and Zoe. They were 3 years old, angelic with their dark curls and wide eyes, but eerily still. They didn't babble. They didn't squirm. They just stared. "I told you the Mercedes had a flat, Adrian," Vesper hissed, her voice cutting through the diner's hum. "But did we have to come here? It smells like failure." "The security team needs 20 minutes to bring the backup SUV, Vesper," Adrian said, his voice deep and frayed. "And the kids haven't eaten since the gala. They're starving. Just sit down." They took the large booth in the corner. The bodyguards formed a perimeter. Giles, sensing a payday that could save his struggling business, practically sprinted over, shoving Lily aside. "Mr. Calloway, an honor. A true honor. We'll clear the place if you want. Just food," Adrian interrupted, massaging his temples. "Scrambled eggs for the children. Soft. No salt. And black coffee for me. And a sparkling water. Bottled. Sealed," Vesper snapped. Giles rushed back to the kitchen, barking orders. "Lily, you take the food out. You're the only one with clean hands. Don't mess this up, or you're out on the street." Lily's heart hammered. She knew who Adrian Calloway was. Everyone did. He was the tech mogul who had revolutionized renewable energy. But she also knew the rumors about his children, The silent triplets. 10 minutes later, Lily balanced the heavy tray. She approached the table, keeping her eyes lowered. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted to finish her shift and go back to her empty, silent apartment. "Here are the eggs, sir," Lily said softly, placing the bowls down. She reached across the table to place a small spoon near the little girl, Zoe. As she leaned in, her scent, a mix of vanilla soap and the rain clinging to her hair, drifted over the stroller. Zoe's head snapped up. The little girl's eyes, usually vacant and distant, locked onto Lily's face. Zoe's pupils dilated. Her breath hitched. Lily froze. She felt a magnetic pull, a physical jolt in her chest that nearly made her drop the tray. She looked at the child. The child looked at her. It was as if the rest of the world had dissolved into grey static. Then Leo turned. Then Noah. The three toddlers who had never acknowledged an outsider, who barely acknowledged their own father, were suddenly vibrating with intensity. They leaned forward against the straps of their stroller, their small hands reaching out. "What are they doing?" Vesper asked, sounding more annoyed than curious. "Sit back, you little brats." Zoe ignored her. She stretched her arm out, her tiny index finger pointing directly at Lily's face. Her lips, unused to forming words, trembled. Zoe whimpered. Adrian dropped his phone. He stared at his daughter. "Zoe?" Leo and Noah joined in, their voices raspy from disuse but growing louder. They pointed at Lily, their eyes filling with tears. "Mama." Then, as if a dam had broken, all three screamed it at the top of their lungs. "Mum! Mum! Mummy!" The sound was deafening. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. It was pure, unadulterated recognition. The entire diner went silent. The cook stopped scraping the grill. Hank the trucker put down his mug. Lily stood paralyzed, tears instantly springing to her eyes without her permission. Her heart felt like it was ripping open. Why did that word shatter her? She had never had children. She had lost her baby 3 years ago during a traumatic emergency surgery. She was barren, alone. "What did you do to them?" Vesper shrieked, standing up and shoving Lily back. "Get away from them, you filthy waitress!" I didn't," Lily stammered, backing away, her hands shaking. "Mummy!" Noah screamed, thrashing against his restraints, reaching for Lily, as if she was the only life raft in a stormy ocean. Adrian stood up slowly. He looked from his hysterical children to the terrified waitress. He saw the tears streaming down Lily's face. He saw the undeniable, biologically impossible connection in that moment. "Who are you?" Adrian asked, his voice low and dangerous. I'm just a waitress," Lily whispered. Vesper grabbed a glass of water and threw the contents into Lily's face. "She's a witch. She's done something to them. Giles, get this trash out of here." The cold water dripped down Lily's nose. The triplets began to wail, a sound of pure heartbreak. "No, no, Mum!" Zoe sobbed, stretching her arms until her joints popped. Giles grabbed Lily by the arm, his grip bruising. "You're fired, Harper. Get your stuff and get out. You've upset Mr. Calloway." "Wait," Adrian said, stepping forward. "No, Adrian," Vesper interjected, stepping between them. "She's clearly deranged. Look at her. She's probably stalking us. We need to leave, now." The bodyguards moved in, forming a wall. They began to wheel the screaming, thrashing children out of the diner. As they were dragged away, Zoe locked eyes with Lily one last time. The look of betrayal on the toddler's face broke Lily into a million pieces. Lily collapsed onto the dirty floor of the diner, weeping uncontrollably, not understanding why she felt like she had just lost her children all over again. The firing was swift and brutal. Giles didn't even give her the severance pay for the week. He tossed her coat out the back door into a puddle. Lily walked home in the rain. She lived in a studio apartment in the crumbling district of Belltown, a place where the elevators never worked and the sirens never stopped. She unlocked her door and collapsed onto the sagging mattress. The sound of those children screaming "Mum" was looping in her head. It was torture. She rolled over and pulled a small, battered wooden box from under her bed. Inside was a single hospital bracelet and a blurry ultrasound photo. Baby girl, stillborn. May 12th, 3 years ago. She traced the date with her finger. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." She had woken up from the anesthesia 3 years ago at St. Jude's Charity Hospital with an empty womb and a doctor telling her there had been complications. The baby hadn't made it. They had disposed of the remains before she even woke up, citing hospital protocol for indigent patients. She had been too weak, too poor, and too drugged to fight them. But today, seeing those triplets, the boy, Noah, had the same dimple on his chin that Lily's father had. Zoe had Lily's exact eye shape, a rare, heterochromatic mix of green and hazel. "It's impossible," she told herself, squeezing her eyes shut. "You're going crazy, Lily. They are Callaways. You are nobody." Meanwhile, across the city, inside the penthouse of the Callaway spire, chaos reigned. The triplets had not stopped crying for 4 hours. "Shut them up!" Vesper yelled, throwing a pillow across the expansive living room. "My head is splitting." Adrian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. He held a glass of scotch, but he hadn't taken a sip. The crying wasn't annoying him. It was haunting him. "They spoke, Vesper," Adrian said quietly. "They blabbered?" Vesper scoffed, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. They saw a woman who probably smelled like old milk and grease, and their confused little brains misfired. Dr. Evans said this might happen. Cognitive dissonance. "They said Mum," Adrian turned to face her. "They have never called you Mum. You've been in their lives since the day I brought them home from the surrogacy agency." Vesper stiffened. For a split second, a flicker of genuine fear crossed her face, but she masked it with indignation. "Are you blaming me because your defective children don't love me? I have tried, Adrian. I have hired the best nannies. I have bought them everything." They pointed at her, Vesper. They looked at her like they knew her. "She's a waitress in a dump." Vesper walked over and placed a hand on his chest, her long red nails digging into his shirt. "Don't let your grief over her cloud your judgment." She was referring to the egg donor. Adrian had used an anonymous donor agency 3 years ago because Vesper, a runway model at the time, refused to ruin her body with a pregnancy. They had hired a surrogate, but the surrogate had died during childbirth, or so the agency had told Adrian. He had simply been handed 3 babies and a death certificate. Adrian pushed Vesper's hand away. "I'm going to check on them." He walked into the nursery. The room was painted in soft pastels, filled with toys that had never been played with. The triplets were huddled together in the corner of the oversized crib, clutching each other. When Adrian approached, they flinched. "Hey," Adrian whispered, his heart aching. "It's Daddy." Leo looked up. His face was blotchy from crying. He looked at Adrian, then pointed toward the door. "Mum?" he asked, his voice tiny and hopeful. Adrian sat on the floor, leaning his head against the bars. "She's not here, Leo." Leo's face crumbled. He let out a wail of despair that sounded far too old for a toddler. Adrian closed his eyes. He couldn't shake the image of the waitress. Her eyes. They were green with flecks of hazel. He stood up abruptly. He walked out of the nursery, past a fuming Vesper, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number that few people possessed. Kellen, Adrian said when the line connected. Profound silence, then a gravelly voice. It's midnight, Adrian. I need you to find someone. A waitress at a place called the Rusty Spoon. Her name tag said Lily. What did she do? Steal your wallet? No, Adrian said, watching Vesper pour herself a large glass of wine in the other room. She made my children speak. I need to know who she is. I need to know where she was born, where she went to school, and most importantly, I need to know what she was doing 3 years ago on May 12th. May 12th, Kellen repeated, the tone shifting from annoyed to sharp. The day the kids were born. Exactly. Dig deep, Kellen, and do it fast. I have a feeling Vesper is going to try to bury whatever we find. The next morning, Lily woke up to a pounding on her door. Her first thought was that it was the landlord. She was 2 weeks late on rent, and without the job at the diner, she was facing eviction. She pulled on a robe and opened the door, preparing to beg for more time. It wasn't the landlord. It was a man in a beige trench coat with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He held a manila envelope. Lily Harper. Yes. My name is Kellen Using. I work for Adrian Calloway. Lily tried to slam the door, but Kellen's foot was already in the jam. He didn't push, he just held it firm. I didn't do anything, Lily cried. Please just leave me alone. Vesper already got me fired. What more do you people want? Blood? We want the truth, Kellen said calmly. Mr. Calloway wants to know why his children think you're their mother. Lily stopped pushing. She opened the door slowly. I don't know. I've never met them before yesterday. May I come in? Lily stepped aside. Kellen entered the tiny apartment. He noted the peeling paint, the lack of heating, and the singular photo on the nightstand, a picture of Lily, heavily pregnant. Kellen walked over to it. He picked it up. When was this taken? 3 years ago, Lily said, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. April. And the baby? Stillborn, Lily's voice cracked. May 12th. Kellen's eyes narrowed. He pulled a photo out of his envelope. It was a picture of the Calloway Triplets' birth certificates. Date of birth, May 12th. Where did you give birth, Lily? St. Jude's Charity Hospital. But, wait. Why does this matter? Because, Kellen said, turning the photo over. Adrian Calloway's children were supposedly born at Herman Memorial, a private facility uptown. But the surrogate, the woman listed on the agency papers, she doesn't exist, Lily. Lily frowned. What do you mean? I ran a background check last night, Kellen explained. The social security number for the surrogate belongs to a man who died in 1990. The agency, New Beginnings, closed down 2 days after the triplets were born. The building is empty. Lily felt the room spin. I don't understand. Adrian was told the surrogate died in childbirth. He was handed 3 babies and told to leave. He was grieving, overwhelmed, and he trusted the doctors. But if the surrogate was fake, then the babies had to come from somewhere else. Kellen looked at Lily, really looked at her. He saw the resemblance. It wasn't just the eyes. It was the chin, the hairline. Did you see your baby when she died? Kellen asked. No, Lily whispered. They sedated me. When I woke up, Dr. Thorne, he told me it was over. He said it was too gruesome to show me. He said he was sparing me the trauma. Dr. Thorne? Kellen's face hardened. Marcus Thorne? Yes, how did you know? Because Marcus Thorne is currently the chief of staff at Herman Memorial, and he is Vesper Cross's cousin. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture so horrific Lily couldn't breathe. You think, Lily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. You think they didn't die? You think she stole them? I think, Kellen said, pocketing the photo, that Adrian Calloway has been raising your children, and I think Vesper Cross is about to realize that she made a very big mistake walking into that diner. Just then, Lily's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She picked it up. Hello? Listen to me closely, you gutter rat, Vesper's voice hissed through the speaker. I know Adrian sent his dog to sniff around. If you say one word to him, if you even think about doing a DNA test, I will make sure you end up in prison for fraud. I have friends in the police department who owe me favors. Leave town. Today. The line went dead. Lily looked at Kellen, fear trembling in her limbs. But then she remembered Zoe's face. She remembered the way Noah had screamed for her. She remembered the 3 years of mourning a grave that might be empty. She looked at Kellen, her eyes hardening into green steel. Take me to him, Lily said. Take me to Adrian. The drive to the Calloway estate took 40 minutes, winding up the cliffside roads where the air grew cleaner and the gates grew taller. Lily sat in the back of Kellen's sedan, her hands clasped so tightly together that her knuckles were white. She wore her only good outfit, a faded navy blouse and black slacks she usually saved for church. He's going to think I'm a gold digger, Lily whispered, staring out the window at the manicured hedges that cost more than her education. Everyone thinks that. Adrian thinks about logic, Kellen replied, his eyes on the rear-view mirror. And logic dictates that 3 toddlers don't hallucinate the same mother at the same time. The car pulled up to the main house, a sprawling modern mansion of glass and steel overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was cold, imposing, and beautiful, much like the man who owned it. As Lily stepped out, the front door opened. Adrian Calloway stood there. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was in a cashmere sweater and jeans, looking less like a billionaire and more like a father at the end of his rope. You came, Adrian said. His voice was guarded. I need to know, Lily said, her voice shaking but her chin held high. I need to know if my babies are dead or if they are sleeping in your house. Adrian studied her face. Up close, without the dim lighting of the diner, the resemblance was jarring. It wasn't just the features, it was the micro-expressions. The way she furrowed her brow when she was worried. Zoe did the exact same thing. Come in. Adrian stepped aside. The interior was vast and silent. Where is she? Lily asked, not wanting to say Vesper's name. Vesper is at the spa. She doesn't know you're here. If she did, she'd have the National Guard at the gate. Adrian led her through the hallway. I want to try something. Consider it a preliminary test before the doctors get here. He led her to the playroom. The door was ajar. Inside, the 3 children were sitting on a plush rug. A nanny was trying to read them a book, but they were despondent, staring at the floor, clutching their blankets. Go in, Adrian whispered. Lily took a breath that rattled in her chest. She pushed the door open. The floorboard creaked. Noah looked up. The reaction was instantaneous. It wasn't the screaming hysteria of the diner. It was something more heartbreaking. Noah dropped his blanket. His lower lip wobbled. He scrambled to his feet, his little legs pumping as he ran across the room. Mama! He hit Lily's legs with full force, wrapping his arms around her knees. Lily dropped to the floor, disregarding the expensive carpet. She scooped him up, burying her face in his neck. He smelled of lavender and baby powder, a scent she had dreamed of for 3 years. Leo and Zoe followed, a stampede of tiny bodies. They tackled her. Zoe grabbed a fistful of Lily's hair and held on tight, as if anchoring herself. Leo pressed his cheek against hers. You came back, a small voice whispered. It was Zoe. her first full sentence. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching. He felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent millions on therapists, specialists, and toys. He had spent hours trying to bond with them, but he had never, not once, seen them look at peace. Until now. Lily was crying silently, kissing their foreheads, checking their fingers, their toes. I'm here, my sweet loves. I'm here. Get away from them! The screech shattered the moment. Vesper stood in the hallway, her face twisted in a mask of pure rage. Beside her stood a tall, gaunt man with silver hair and icy blue eyes, Dr. Aris Vane. Vesper! Adrian turned, his face hardening. I told you. You let this street trash into our home. Vesper stormed past him, grabbing Zoe's arm to pull her away from Lily. Zoe screamed, biting Vesper's hand. Ah! You little savage! Vesper recoiled, raising her hand as if to strike the child. Don't you dare! Adrian's voice was a low growl. He stepped between Vesper and the children. If you ever raise a hand to them again, you will be out of this house before your feet touch the ground. Vesper composed herself, smoothing her white dress. She pointed a manicured finger at Lily. She is manipulating them. She's probably wearing pheromones or something. And you brought him? She gestured to Dr. Vane. Dr. Vane is the finest geneticist in the state. He is here to put an end to this farce. Lily looked up at Dr. Vane. She recognized him instantly, even without the surgical mask. He was the man who had stood over her bed when she was drugged and groggy. You, Lily whispered, standing up, keeping the children behind her. You told me they died. You told me my baby girl was gone. Dr. Vane adjusted his glasses, looking at her with the cold detachment of a reptile. Miss Harper, I remember you. A tragic case. Hysteria, poverty, malnutrition. It is not uncommon for patients with severe trauma to construct elaborate fantasies to cope with their loss. You lost a child, Miss Harper. One child, not three. I felt them kicking, Lily shouted. I knew there was more than one. You told me it was just excess fluid. Medical delusion, Vane said dismissively to Adrian. Mr. Calloway, this woman is clearly unstable. I suggest we perform a DNA test immediately to put this to rest, and then get a restraining order. I agree, Adrian said. Kellen has a team on the way from an independent lab. Nonsense, Vesper snapped. Why wait? Dr. Vane has a kit in his bag. We can do the swab now, run it at the hospital lab, and have results by tonight. Unless you don't trust the Chief of Staff of Herman Memorial. Adrian hesitated. He looked at Lily, holding his children. He looked at Vesper, the woman he was supposed to marry. Fine, Adrian said. But I watch the swab, and Kellen drives the sample to the lab with the doctor. Vesper smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perfect. The hours while they waited for the results were the longest of Lily's life. Adrian allowed her to stay in the guest wing, mostly because the triplets went into a full-blown panic attack whenever she tried to leave the room. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, Noah asleep in her lap, while Leo and Zoe played quietly at her feet. You have his nose, Lily whispered to Noah, tracing the line of his profile. She was thinking of the father, a man she had loved briefly in college, who had died in a car accident before she even knew she was pregnant. She had been alone, vulnerable, the perfect target for a predator like Dr. Vane. Downstairs, the atmosphere was toxic. Vesper was pacing the library, drinking a martini. You need to fix this, Aris, Vesper hissed into her phone, ensuring Adrian was out of earshot. If that test comes back positive, we are both finished. Do you understand? Finished. The sample is taken care of. Dr. Vane's voice came through the line, calm and oily. I swapped the swabs in the elevator while your fiancé's guard dog was distracted. The DNA they are testing belongs to a random patient from the oncology ward. It will be a 0% match." "Good," Vesper exhaled. "And the records? Incinerated 3 years ago. There is no paper trail, Vesper. Only the word of a poor, uneducated waitress against the chief of staff and the future Mrs. Calloway. Adrian is a man of science. He will believe the paper." "He better," Vesper snapped. "I've put 3 years into this miserable family. I'm not losing the Calloway fortune because some breeder crawled out of the gutter." She hung up and checked her reflection. She looked perfect. The grieving, supportive stepmother-to-be. At 8:00 p.m., Kellen returned. He looked grim. He carried a sealed envelope. Adrian summoned everyone to the main living room. Lily walked down the grand staircase, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She left the children sleeping with the nanny, promising she would be right back. Adrian stood by the fireplace. He looked at Lily, his eyes searching for something. Hope, perhaps. "Read it," Adrian commanded. Kellen opened the envelope. He pulled out the document. He scanned it, his frown deepening. He looked at Lily, then at Adrian. "The probability of maternity," Kellen paused, "is 0.00%. The room went silent. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. "That's wrong. That's a lie." "Science doesn't lie, sweetie," Vesper said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. She walked over to Adrian and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Oh, Adrian, I told you. She's sick. She truly believes it." Adrian took the paper. He stared at the numbers. 0 match. He looked at Lily. The connection he had felt. The instinct. Was it just a desperate man wanting a mother for his children? Was Dr. Vane right? Was she just a grieving woman projecting her loss onto his kids? "Adrian," Lily stepped forward, tears spilling over. "Please look at me, look at Noah. You saw them. You heard them call me Mum. A test can be faked. A mother's bond cannot." "Ms. Harper," Adrian said, his voice cold, shutting down. It was his defense mechanism. When hurt, he built walls. "I think it's time you left." "No, you can't!" Lily reached out. "Don't touch him," Vesper shouted. "Kellen, remove her. If she resists, call the police." Kellen looked conflicted. He looked at the test, then at Lily. But he worked for Adrian. "Lily," Kellen said softly. "Come on, don't make this harder." "They are mine!" Lily screamed as Kellen took her arm. "Ask Dr. Vane how much she paid him. Ask him." "Get her out!" Vesper shrieked. As Lily was dragged toward the heavy oak doors, a sound echoed from the top of the stairs. It was a wail. Leo stood at the banister, clutching the railing. "Mama!" Lily thrashed against Kellen's grip. "Leo, I'm here! I'm not leaving you!" "Take her away," Adrian said, turning his back to the door. He couldn't watch. He felt like he was cutting off his own limb. But the paper said she was a stranger. The heavy doors slammed shut, severing the connection. Lily was left standing on the cold concrete of the driveway, the rain beginning to fall again. Inside, Vesper exhaled, suppressing a triumphant smile. Finally. Now, let's get the children some warm milk. They must be exhausted from all this excitement. Adrian didn't answer. He stared into the fire. The image of Lily's devastated face burned into his retinas. 2 days passed. Lily was back in her apartment, sitting in the dark. She hadn't eaten. She felt like she had died. Then, a knock on the door. Not a pound, but a rhythmic tap. She opened it. It was Kellen. He didn't have a trench coat this time. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I drove you home that night," Kellen said without a greeting. "And I saw the way you looked at the dashboard." "What?" Lily asked, confused. "You looked at the dashboard clock. You were counting the seconds." Kellen stepped inside. I worked in intelligence before I worked for Calloway. I know when people are lying. You weren't lying. The test was run by Dr. Vane's lab, Kellen interrupted. But here's the thing about rich people, Lily. They get sloppy. Vesper threw a party yesterday to celebrate getting rid of the stalker. She got drunk. Kellen pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. She didn't say anything explicitly, Kellen admitted, but she fired a maid for finding something in the guest room trash. A wrapper. He held up a crumpled piece of plastic in an evidence bag. It's a wrapper for a sterile swab, Kellen said. But the batch number? It doesn't match the one Dr. Vane used in the living room. This one was manufactured 3 years ago. Lily stared at it. What does that mean? It means, Kellen grinned, a predatory look crossing his face, that Vane didn't just swap the sample. He was sloppy. And I went dumpster diving behind the clinic where Vane used to work, the one that conveniently burned down. I didn't find records, but I found a nurse named Betty, who was fired for asking too many questions about a stillbirth that cried. Lily's heart stopped, then restarted with the force of a sledgehammer. Betty still has her personal journals, Kellen said, and she wrote down the tag number of the deceased baby. She wrote down 3 numbers, Lily, sequential numbers. Kellen handed her a file. Adrian doesn't know I'm here. He's depressed. He's barely functioning. But tomorrow is the Calloway Foundation Gala. The press will be there, the investors, and Vesper expects to be announced as the official mother of the heirs. Lily looked at the file. She looked at Kellen. What do we do? She asked. Kellen's smile turned dark. We crash the party. And we don't just bring a DNA test. We bring the whole damn apocalypse. The Calloway Foundation Gala was the event of the season in Seattle. It was held in the Crystal Ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel, a venue dripping with gold leaf and chandeliers that cost more than most houses. The press was there in droves, cameras flashing like lightning storms, desperate for a glimpse of the reclusive billionaire and his recovered children. Vesper Cross was in her element. She wore a crimson gown that hugged her figure like a second skin, diamonds dripping from her neck and ears. She stood on the raised dais, holding a glass of champagne, basking in the adoration of the city's elite. Adrian stood beside her, looking like a man marching to the gallows. He wore a tuxedo, but his tie was loose, and his eyes were hollow. He scanned the crowd restlessly, though he didn't know who he was looking for. He had tried to call Lily 3 times since he kicked her out. The number was disconnected. Smile, darling, Vesper whispered through her teeth, pinching his arm. The mayor is looking, and the children are about to come out. I don't want them paraded like zoo animals, Vesper, Adrian muttered. They are the heirs. The board needs to see they are stable. Dr. Vane gave them a mild sedative. They'll be perfect angels. At the mention of Dr. Vane, Adrian stiffened. The doctor was standing near the buffet, looking smug in a velvet suit, chatting with the hospital board members. Ladies and gentlemen, Vesper tapped her microphone. The room hushed. Thank you for coming. Tonight is about family. It has been a difficult road. But love conquers all. I am so proud to officially introduce the Calloway heirs, my stepchildren, Leo, Noah, and Zoe. The heavy curtains behind the stage parted. The nannies wheeled out the stroller. The triplets were dressed in miniature designer outfits. They looked groggy, their eyes heavy, their movements sluggish. The crowd applauded politely. Adrian stepped forward to take Zoe's hand, his heart breaking at their lethargy. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom boom open. The sound echoed like a gunshot, silencing the applause. Heads turned. Gasps rippled through the room. Standing in the doorway was not a security guard, and certainly not a guest on the list. It was Kellen. He wore his tactical suit, looking ready for war. And beside him, holding his arm for support, was Lily Harper. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform. Kellen had used his resources. She wore a simple, elegant, emerald green floor-length gown that brought out the fire in her eyes. Her hair was swept back, revealing a face set in stone. She looked terrified, but she also looked like a queen coming to reclaim her throne. "Security!" Vesper shrieked into the microphone, the feedback whining. "Get them out! Someone call the police! We already called them!" Kellen's voice boomed across the hall. He didn't need a microphone. "But they aren't here for us." 2 security guards rushed toward Lily, but Kellen stepped in front of her, flashing a badge that made them freeze. "Federal investigation. Step back unless you want to be charged as accomplices to kidnapping." The room erupted in whispers. "Kidnapping?" the mayor asked, stepping closer to the stage. "What is the meaning of this, Calloway?" Adrian stared at Lily. He felt a jolt of electricity. "Let them speak," he commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. "Adrian, no!" Vesper grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "She's crazy. She's here to ruin us." Lily walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the billionaires. She looked only at the stage, at the sight of the green dress, at the scent of vanilla drifting through the air. The sedative in the Triplets' systems seemed to fail against the power of biology. Noah rubbed his eyes. He sat up. He saw her. "Mum." It wasn't a question this time. It was a cry of relief. Lily reached the foot of the stage. "I am not crazy," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough for the front row to hear. "And I am not a stalker. I am a mother, and I am here for my children." "Liar!" Dr. Vane shouted, pushing his way through the crowd. "We have DNA evidence. This woman is a fraud." "The DNA test you faked?" Kellen stepped onto the stage, bypassing the stairs with a fluid leap. He plugged a USB drive into the AV system, faster than the sound engineer could stop him. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been showing the Calloway logo, flickered. A video appeared. It was shaky, recorded on a phone. It showed Dr. Vane in an alleyway, handing a thick envelope of cash to a man in a hooded sweatshirt. Audio from the video. "Make sure the records from St. Jude's are gone. The girl thinks the baby died. If she ever finds out she had 3, and that I sold them to Calloway, we all go to jail." The ballroom went deathly silent. Dr. Vane's face turned the color of ash. He turned to run, but he bumped straight into the chest of a police officer who had quietly entered through the side door. "That's not all," Kellen said, looking at Vesper. "Tell them, Betty." An older woman, frail and nervous, stepped out from behind Lily. She wore a nurse's uniform from a decade ago. "I was the night nurse," Betty said, her voice shaking into the microphone Kellen handed her. "May 12th, St. Jude's. Lily Harper came in for an emergency C-section. She was under general anesthesia. Dr. Vane delivered triplets. 2 boys, 1 girl. Healthy. Perfect." Betty pointed a trembling finger at Vesper. "That woman, Ms. Cross, she came in the back door." She had a check. She told Dr. Vane she needed babies because her fiancé wouldn't marry her without an heir, and she didn't want to ruin her figure. They told Lily the babies died. They put medical waste on the chart. The crowd gasped. The cameras were going wild. Adrian turned to Vesper. His face was unreadable, a mask of terrifying calm. "Is it true?" he asked softly. Vesper laughed. It was a brittle, hysterical sound. "Adrian, please, don't be naive. I did it for us. You wanted a family. I gave you one. Who cares where they came from? They are healthy. I saved them from a life of poverty with this waitress. You stole them," Adrian said, his voice rising. "You let a mother grieve for 3 years. You let me believe I used a surrogate who died." "I made you a father," Vesper screamed, her mask slipping completely. "I did everything for this family. I deserve this fortune. You deserve a cell," Adrian said. He shoved her hand off his arm. He walked to the edge of the stage and reached down. Lily took his hand. He pulled her up. Lily didn't waste a second on Vesper. She dropped to her knees beside the stroller. She undid the straps. "My babies," she sobbed. Leo, Noah, and Zoe tumbled out of the stroller and into her arms. The reunion was visceral. They buried their faces in her neck, their small hands clutching her dress, crying, "Mum, Mum, Mum," over and over again. The bond was undeniable. It was primal. It was the truth. Adrian watched them, tears streaming down his face. He looked at the police officers. "Get her out of my sight," Adrian commanded, pointing at Vesper. The downfall of Vesper Cross was not quiet. It was a spectacle of destruction that the elite of Seattle would whisper about for decades. As the police officers ascended the stage, the facade of the polished socialite shattered completely. Vesper didn't go gracefully. When the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she let out a shriek that curdled the blood of everyone in the crystal ballroom. She kicked at the officers, her heels tearing the expensive carpet, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her voice cracking as she was hauled toward the exit. She turned her wild eyes on Adrian, spitting on the floor near his shoes. "I saved them. I gave them a life. You ungrateful wretch. You would be nothing without me." The press photographers, usually kept at bay by velvet ropes, surged forward like sharks smelling blood. Flashbulbs erupted in a blinding strobe, capturing every second of her humiliation. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her face, marking her as the monster she had hidden so well. Dr. Aris Vane, by contrast, dissolved into a puddle of cowardice. He didn't scream, he begged. As officers dragged him past the stage, he blubbered, pointing a shaking finger at Vesper. "She made me do it. It was her idea. She threatened my practice. I'll testify. I'll tell you everything." His pleas fell on deaf ears. The hard karma had arrived, and it was merciless. Adrian watched them go, his expression stone cold. He felt a hand on his arm and looked down. Lily was there, trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the confrontation. He covered her hand with his own, grounding her. "It's over," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "They can never hurt you again." The days following the gala were a blur of legal proceedings and vindication. With Kellen's video evidence and Nurse Betty's tearful, detailed testimony, the case against Vesper and Vane was watertight. But the moment that truly mattered didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a quiet medical office 3 days later. Adrian stood by the window, while Lily sat in a leather chair, holding a sealed envelope. The official, court-ordered DNA test. She opened it with shaking fingers. She scanned the page, her breath hitching in her throat. Probability of maternity, 99.9999%. She didn't cheer. She simply closed her eyes and let the paper fall to her lap, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. It was the physical proof that she wasn't crazy, that her grief had been real, and that her instincts had been right. Adrian walked over and knelt before her. The billionaire tech mogul, a man who commanded thousands of employees, looked humbled. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with regret, "I am so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let them take you away that night. I was so afraid of the pain that I became blind to the truth." Lily opened her eyes. She saw the sincerity in his gaze. She reached out and touched his cheek. You were a victim too, Adrian. She stole 3 years from both of us. But she won't steal today. 6 months later. The Calloway estate had changed. The sterile, museum-like quality of the house had vanished, replaced by the chaotic, beautiful warmth of a family home. The nursery, once a cold room of greys and whites, was now an explosion of colour. A mural of a jungle covered one wall, painted in bright yellows and greens. Toys were no longer displayed on shelves. They were scattered across the floor. Blocks, race cars, and stuffed animals in a happy disarray. But the biggest change was the sound. The silence was gone. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kitchen was filled with laughter. Lily stood at the massive marble island, covered in flour. She was baking chocolate chip cookies, and her 3 sous chefs were helping, mostly by making a mess. Noah was trying to eat raw dough, his face smeared with sugar. Leo was diligently trying to flatten a piece of dough with a toy hammer, and Zoe was sitting on the counter, swinging her legs and singing a song that consisted entirely of the word happy. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, watching them. He had come home early from the office, drawn back by the magnetic pull of the life he almost missed. He loosened his tie, a small smile playing on his lips. The darkness that had shadowed him for years had finally lifted. Lily looked up and caught him watching. Her face lit up. She looked healthier now, the hollows in her cheeks filled out, her eyes sparkling with a joy that had been absent for too long. "Careful, Mr. Calloway," she teased, dusting her hands on her apron. "You're entering a combat zone. Flour is flying, and Noah is armed with a spatula." Adrian laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made Leo look up and grin. "I think I can handle the risk." He walked over, ignoring the mess, and picked up Zoe. She immediately pressed a sticky, chocolate-covered hand against his cheek. "Dada!" she chirped. "Hi, Princess," Adrian said, kissing her forehead, not caring about the chocolate. He looked at Lily, his expression turning serious. "I had a meeting with the board today. They wanted to know if I'm returning as CEO full-time next quarter." Lily stopped mixing the batter. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them I have a more important job right now," Adrian said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I missed the first 3 years of their lives, Lily. I missed their first steps. I missed hearing them breathe while they slept. I don't want to miss another second." Lily softened, her heart swelling. "They love having you here." "I have something for you," Adrian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys attached to a silver keychain. He placed them on the flour-dusted counter. Lily looked at them, confused. "A car?" "A building," Adrian corrected. "I bought the block on 4th and Elm." Lily's eyes widened in recognition. "The rusty spoon." "I bought it this morning," Adrian explained softly. "I'm shutting it down. We're going to gut it and rebuild it. I want to turn it into a community center for mothers in need. Free prenatal care, legal aid, mental health support. A place where no woman will ever have to go through what you went through alone. And I want you to run it." Lily covered her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. "Adrian, it's necessary," he said firmly. "And don't worry about the staff. I offered the good ones jobs at the estate. As for Giles," Adrian's expression darkened with a grim satisfaction. "I made sure his reputation preceded him. The only job he could find is working the graveyard shift at a gas station in Tacoma. I hear the boss there yells even louder than he did. Karma has a way of finding everyone." Lily let out a teary laugh. "Hard karma." "Exactly." Adrian stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. The air in the kitchen shifted, charged with a tension that had been building for months. Zoe, still in Adrian's arms, looked from her father to her mother. She frowned, sensing the hesitation. She pointed a tiny, chocolate-stained finger at Lily, then at Adrian. "Kiss," Zoe commanded, her voice clear and authoritative. Lily blushed a deep crimson, laughing nervously. "Zoe," Adrian chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. "Well," he whispered, leaning in closer until their foreheads were almost touching. "We really shouldn't disobey the children. They've been right about everything so far." Lily looked up into his steel-grey eyes, seeing nothing but love and a future she had fought so hard to reclaim. "I suppose you're right." He kissed her. It wasn't a Hollywood kiss. It was better. It was soft, tentative, and tasted of chocolate and promise. It was the sealing of a bond that had survived lies, theft, and time itself. Outside the window, the relentless Seattle rain finally slowed to a stop. The clouds parted, allowing a single, brilliant ray of sunlight to pierce through, illuminating the kitchen where a family, once broken, was finally, beautifully whole. And that is the incredible story of how 3 silent babies brought down a billion-dollar empire of lies just by saying one word. Vesper Cross and Dr. Vane are currently serving 25 years in federal prison, proof that no amount of money can hide the truth forever, and that karma always hits back harder. I hope you enjoyed this roller coaster of emotion. If this story touched your heart, or if you were cheering when Vesper got dragged out of that gala, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new dramas every week. What would you have done if you were Lily? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.